Welcome everyone to the ultimate guide to Blender 3D rigging and animation, and this is where we left it off. Now what I want to do is I want to actually shorten this distance out. In other words, I don't want it moving quite so far. So what I want to do is I want to come to frame 200 and I want to pull that back to say something like that, and instead now I want to press I, location. Now what that should have done is it means that this now should roll a little bit better than where it did before. So if I press spacebar, you can see rolling. And it looks a lot more realistic now, and we haven't got as much sliding on there as what we had before. Now we still have some sliding on the end, and the reason for that is because when you're doing a rolling barrel or something like that, you actually want it to go slightly further than the actual roll. In other words, if I grab all three of these, so I'm clicking on one, shift clicking the next one, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move them over. So I'm going to press them, move them over to, let's say, 210, something like that. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm also going to change the frames to end on 210. If I press spacebar now, you'll see it stops rolling nearly in the correct place. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press G, move them back to 205, put this on 205, press spacebar. Now you'll see it's rolling along, rolling, comes to nearly a stop, and there you go. You can see it's near enough, nearly there. So you can see that we can play around with this a little bit, but you do get the idea of how this barrel now is, you know, made to look kind of realistic in the way that we've set this up. All right, so we've just actually gone through then how we do rotation, how we do location. We haven't discussed scale yet. We're going to discuss that a little bit later on, but these are the basics of animation within Blender. Now if I go back to layout now, you'll see all that disappears. There's not anything there, not a lot of information there. Now the other thing is, if I try and put this back over here, of course the moment I start the animation, it's just going to restart again. So now you can see I've got both of these moving exactly the way we wanted to. Now let's discuss, as part of the basic animation, balls bouncing and things like that. So the first thing I'm going to do is, for anything that's bouncing in real time, you're going to need a collider. So you could have, you know, this barrel rolling down here on its own. That's something you can actually do. But what we'll do is we'll work on this ball and I'll show you exactly how it works. So let's come to the floor first though. Come over to our, our physics property over here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put this on collision. So I'm going to click on collision. I don't need to alter any of this at the moment. All it's there for is to make sure that when this ball actually drops down, it's going to actually collide with this floor. Now let's come back to this beach ball. And what I want to do is put this on soft body. Now if I press spacebar now, nothing's going to happen. The ball's not going to roll or anything like that. There you go. It's just going to flow up and down like this, which is not exactly what we want. So how do we make this ball drop down there? All we need to do is turn off the goal, come down to where it says edges, and all you want to do then is put the bending on something like 8. Now what will happen is the ball will drop down, it will hit the floor, and it will actually look kind of realistic. So if I put this on here, you'll see ball bounces, and there you go. And that's based on the amount of bending. If I put the bending on something like 4, you'll see now just how much bending actually happens with that. And if I put this bending on something like 20, and there you go, it's bouncing a lot more like an actual beach ball. Now the other thing is what you can do with this is you can actually turn off gravity. So gravity is determining how heavy this ball is. We can also turn up, we'll just try to turn up the plasticity, and now press spacebar. And there you go, you can see these really do have a long effect. So let's come down and we'll have something called field weights here. And what we want to do is, first of all, I'm going to turn down the gravity to something like 0.1, basically reducing the gravity to something akin to on the moon or something like that. Now, if I press space, you'll see it floats down much slower. And when it bounces much higher because obviously there's less gravity here. Now, if we put this, let's say on 2, that will be 2 bar basically, which is twice as much gravity as what we have here on Earth. When I press the space bar, you'll see it really tries and pushes it and, you know, into the floor because obviously there's a lot more gravity pushing it down. So let's just set that back to 1. And there we go. There's our beach ball bouncing up and down. All right, so the things that we've gone through now is the basics animation of basically setting something up with a roll and moving along, setting something up where it's just moving in space and time, just the location, and going on to the beach ball. So now you know how to set up a basic animation to do with the physics. So basically something falling, something driving along, or something like that. Just a basic animation of that. All right, so the next thing we're going to do then is move on to our swing animation. So I'm going to click off the basic animation, come to our swing, and here we are. Here's our swing. So for swings and things like that, everything past this point, pretty much except morphing or things like shape keys, will be used in basically a rig from this point out, because the basic animation, as I said, will work in just Blender, but if you really want to learn about animation, you really need to start using bones and things like that. All right, so the first thing we need to do is, if we bring in our cursor, so shift right click, wherever this cursor is, that is where a bone will appear. So if I press shift A, come down and bring in an armature, you will see the bone appears there. Not very handy if we want our bone over there. I need to move it now over to where it needs to be. But that is a really hard way of doing it. So the easiest way of doing it actually is to come to our tree, press tab, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the top, like so. And then what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to double tap the A, just to make sure I've got nothing selected. I'm going to press Z to go into wireframe, and then all I'm going to do is I'm just going to select all of these points here. So if I press B, I'm going to select all of these points here, like so. And then I'm going to press Shift S, cursor to selected, tab, let's put it back onto material. And now you can see that that cursor pretty much in the middle of this actual tree trunk, exactly where I wanted it. All right, let's double tap the A. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Shift A, bring in a armature. Now, it's important that you understand the first bone that you bring in should always be something called a root bone, or one bone to rule them all, basically is what I call it. It's basically the bone where every other bone is attached to. It serves no other purpose other than if you move this bone, every other bone moves with it. It's important because if you don't have a root bone, sometimes when you send through rigs and things like that to Unreal or even in Blender, you'll end up with the actual animation moving from where you initially wanted it. So it's very important that we actually create a root bone and attach our other bones to it. All right. So now, this is the actual root bone. We're going to have this. Probably I'll turn it sideways. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press R, Y, 90, and I'll just pull it out a little bit. Now, there are a few other things that you need to know about bones. First of all, we've got a armature in here. So this now will give us an armature. So what do I mean by that? If I come in and I'm just going to put these into a nice order. So I'm just going to click all of these up. And then I'm going to find you the armature. I'm going to pull this down a little bit so I can see what I'm doing. And here is our armature here. So this is this bone. It's very important when you bring in a new armature that you rename it, because there is a bug in Blender where if you send the armature or rig out to another program like Unreal Engine, it doesn't actually work correctly if it's still left with the name armature. So I'm just going to rename this to swing, like so, and then I'm going to grab the armature and put it in swing animation like that, and then I'm going to open it up. You can see at the moment, if I open this, you can see that we've got armature 01. If I open this, we've got one bone, which is this one. This is important because I'm going to show you in the next lesson that you will be able to see all the bones that you add in here and why it's important that you also call them bones. All right, everyone, so I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.